Welcome everybody to Phoenix Books in beautiful downtown Burlington, and really glad you could come tonight. Tonight we're here with a Montreal author, Nora Caron. Nora has written 2 books of a trilogy, and tonight we're here to celebrate the second of the 2 books, The New Dimensions of Being. This is the first Montreal author that we've hosted here in our Burlington store, and we're really excited that Nora made the trip down. Thank you again so much for coming, and without any further ado, here's Nora.
Thank you for coming out. I'm really happy to be here. I've had so many funny events, where I don't know what's going to happen when I show up. Some events, the room is packed, and then other events, there's birds we can hear in the distance. But it's really nice to see you tonight. And I'll tell you a little bit about how I started writing, because I know probably some of you here are writers, or some of you are poets, or I don't know, who's a writer in this room? Any aspiring writers? No? Okay, that's fine, that's a first. But anybody interested in the art of writing? No? Yes? Okay, perfect. Wonderful. I started writing very young. And the reason why I started writing was basically so that I could deal with things in my life that I didn't really understand how to deal with. So writing for me was a way to cope. But it soon began a whole series of what I call revelations, because as I was writing, I was rereading myself, and I was understanding myself better. And as I understood myself better, I realized that I had different tools accessible to me that were free. I didn't have to go see a psychologist. I didn't have to pay for certain services that others did, because I found the answers by myself through writing. And Journey to the Heart, my first book, is all about the journey inward. So it's a woman who has a burnout. And what happens is she really breaks down. A lot of things happen in her life, and she just can't cope with reality anymore. So she goes to Mexico. And once in Mexico, she meets a wonderful woman and her son. And they help her to reconnect with what I call spirit. So what I mean by spirit, I don't mean something that is visible or intellectual. It's really invisible. It's a force inside of us that moves and helps us navigate in life when we are lost, confused, discouraged, depressed, all those things. And I really believe we have the tools inside of us to self-heal, all of us here. Certain people say, oh, well, yeah, you got out of your depression because you're a happy person. But being a happy person doesn't come naturally. You got to really work on it. And these books are happy books, but they took me a while to understand myself. And then once I understood myself, I realized a lot of people could learn from these books. So yes, I give workshops in Montreal. I talk a lot about joy. That's my central theme in everything I've ever taught, is joy. Because joy, when we are born, we're children, we grow up, and as we grow up, we lose the joy of life. We become carried away with work, with relationships, with money, with stress, with disease, illness, and then eventually we break down. Our bodies break down, our minds break down if we're not careful. And so joy is that capacity to transcend the events of our lives that seem at first dark and heavy and very negative. And these books were a way for me to give these teachings that I learned a few years ago when I myself burnt out at 24. And I know it seems young, but I really burnt out, and I lost everything. I lost a relationship, my house, and I ended up walking alone for a while. And I thought, I don't know what joy is. I don't know what happiness is anymore. And that's when Journey to the Heart happened. It was really my own reaching inside, turning the light switch back on. And so that's what happened when I started writing. New Dimensions of Being, it was not expected that I would write a second book, to be honest. One night I woke up and I had a vision of Lucina, who looks a little bit like our friend here. Actually, my character really looks like our friend here. And, I had a vision of her come to talk to me, and she goes, "It's not finished yet. I need you to keep writing. I have more to tell." And this has to do with sacred female energy, and it has to do with respecting ourselves as women. And it has to do a lot with taking responsibility for our actions. Because a lot of the things in my life happened, and they really brought me down. And I felt destroyed by them, to be honest. I felt like something had broken inside of me. And I realized, well, I can keep blaming other people. I can keep saying that's the fault of this guy, of my mother, of my father, whoever I could find blame. But then I realized, wait a minute. The journey is to look within and say, what am I doing wrong? You know, what am I doing wrong that keeps causing these patterns to come back in my life and hurt me? I feel hurt, but what am I letting in that hurts me? And then it became this book, which is basically a reflection on a woman who stumbles around. She's found the true love of her life. She's found a wonderful man, but she keeps doing mistakes. She makes mistake after mistake, and it might be ridiculous to some of you to say, well, no, of course you don't do that. You know, what are you doing? But she's learning as she makes mistakes, and she goes, you know, love is not something that just happens and it, you know, you just leave it there. You have to really work at it. And so these are important lessons in the book about what do you have to do to keep something alive and to stop blaming other people. So that's one of the themes in this book. And I also want to read something tonight. And this poem came to me one night as I was beginning to write New Dimensions of Being, and it's one of my favorite poems. So I'm sure some of you know this poem, and it's William Ernest Henley who wrote it in 1888. And it's called Invictus. Does anybody know this poem? Okay. So Lucina, my character in the book, who's always blaming other people for all her problems, as she realizes the power that she has to create and affect her world, this poem comes up in her mind, and it's going to be a recurring theme throughout the book, to be the master of your fate. And this is what I want to read tonight. So, out of the night that covers me, black as the pit from pole to pole, I thank whatever gods may be for my unconquerable soul. In the fell clutch of circumstance, I have not winced nor cried aloud. Under the bludgeonings of chance, my head is bloody but unbowed. Beyond this place of wrath and tears looms but the horror of the shade, and yet the menace of the years finds and shall find me unafraid. It matters not how straight the gate, how charged with punishments the scroll. I am the master of my fate. I am the captain of my soul. And so there's a lot to be said about that poem, but suffice to say that when you start to realize that a lot of your life depends on how you're navigating your ship, a lot of things change. You know, we're always talking about the law of attraction and things like this, but it's more than that. It's about realizing that life is not happening. You are active in your life. You are acting on an energy, and that energy is reflecting back to you. And so New Dimensions of Being is about that shift in consciousness. So, and I do want to talk a bit about the trilogy. My third book is coming out June 7th, and that will be in Montreal. It's called Jaguar Dreams. And this third book is a lot about facing our fears. And it calls upon the warrior woman in all of us. And I know we're all women here tonight, so we can all relate. You know, a lot of us, we have reached a point where we're free, we're happy, you know, we can do our lives, but there are still invisible forces, I think, that are still, you know, telling women a little bit what to do and how to do it. And this book is all about the wild woman, so a little bit women who run with the wolves. I don't know if any one of you has read this book, but it's really the wild woman, the woman who is not afraid to go off into the jungle and face her fears and face death and come back. And she realized there's a lot of things in this last book. So that's Jaguar Dreams. But tonight that won't be the discussion. So, and a last little thing I did want to mention. This excerpt I had trouble finding the right excerpt for tonight because given this is my first time in Burlington, but I kind of went with the flow, and I think all of us can say we had a very long winter this year, right? Like it felt, really the word is it felt like hell. I can really say I felt it was extremely long. I felt tired. I was sick a lot, and I kept thinking, how am I going to get out of this period of intense I felt like things were dragging me down. And so now that it's May, it's a lot nicer. So Lucina, at the end of the book, she comes full circle. She's gone through her personal hell. And I felt this was appropriate. I didn't want to start off the evening talking about hell because I thought, I think winter has been hell enough. So I didn't want to bring that up, but suffice to say she does go through a period of darkness. But I believe, to see the light, you do have to go through some darkness. And there are a lot of spiritual teachers out there that tell you, don't focus on the negative, only the positive, don't think of the bad and all that. That's good in theory, but the reality is we're human, and when we live dark things, we have to accept them. We have to let it sink in. We have to embrace it. And then after, we have to realize that it's just passing. All things pass. And so Lucina has absorbed that darkness, and now she's coming into the light, and she meets a Hopi Indian. And it is near the end of the book. It's not the end of the book. So I will read it. So here we go. Chapter 19. Once Weeping Willow's speech was over, he stood up and excused himself, saying he needed a moment of silence. He walked over to the crooked porch and sat down beside a broken white flower pot with a strange-looking flower growing in it. Unable to contain herself any longer, Lucina got up and followed Weeping Willow. She had to speak to him about her recurring dream and hopefully get some clear answers as to what it all meant. Weeping Willow was slowly filling his pipe with tobacco. Noticing her, he smiled and indicated that she should sit down next to him. "You must be the famous Miss Canada I keep hearing about. Please sit down with me," the Hopi Indian said, his brown eyes friendly and inviting. He was certainly the polar opposite of John. "I'm sorry to bother you, but I was very moved by the Blue Star Kachina prophecy," Lucina began, sitting self-consciously next to the stranger. "I wanted to share with you a dream I've been having for the past few months, and maybe you can help me with it. It's been haunting me, and I just want to understand it better." "Sure, go ahead." Weeping Willow took a puff of his pipe, and a strong tobacco odor swirled around them. Lucina recounted her dream in detail, starting with the screaming people, the flames burning everywhere, and described the despair and sadness that filled her every time she woke up. She also mentioned how her last dream had been different, and what the being had said to her about purification and the next step. She described the abyss scene and how she had fallen into the darkness, seriously thinking her life was about to end. Weeping Willow nodded slowly and smoked his pipe, listening to her intently, his brown eyes closed. When Lucina had finished, he took one long haul of his pipe and remained silent for a few seconds. "This is so interesting. I can see why hearing our prophecy tonight has shaken you up," he said with a wrinkled brow. "I can see you are still in the dark about the significance of your dream. Lucina, are you a woman who believes in prophetic visions?" Lifting her eyebrows, Lucina took a moment before she replied. Was this a trick question? She decided to answer truthfully. "I believe some people on earth can read the future, yes, but I don't believe I can read the future." "I see." Weeping Willow nodded, lost in thought. They sat in silence for a while. Lucina sat up straight, looking forward to his next thoughts. "It seems to me that this dream, since you don't believe it to be a vision of your future, could just be spirit talking to you about your present moment in life. I don't know much about your life, but you recently traversed a difficult moment where you had to let go of things and surrender to a higher force. Have you had to burn away some beliefs and venture into an unknown land?" At that, Lucina couldn't help herself. She laughed loudly and uncontrollably. That was a huge understatement. Weeping Willow pursed his lips together and looked at her. I guess that would be yes. Then your dream is just indicating that you are passing from one state of being into another. You are purifying yourself, shedding skins, and becoming more real. This abyss that you fell into the last time is most definitely a new era in your life. You don't have to tell me what you've lived recently, but I imagine it was of great impact. Lucina was sad suddenly as she saw flashes of her recent past. She saw herself crying in the dark at night, holding herself, feeling guilty and alone, feeling lost and disoriented. She saw herself jumping and running to the door any time someone knocked. She saw flashes of broken glass on the floor, red roses on the porch, a prayer in a church, her body shaking in fear, Maria hugging her and telling her everything would be all right. Life is a series of moments which we can fight or surrender to, Weeping Willow said in a gentle voice. We are always faced with two paths. There is the path of strong resistance and then the path of least resistance. Always take the path of least resistance, for that is where spirit is flowing. If you take the path of greater resistance, you will find yourself losing precious time and energy. That's funny because taking the path of least resistance is what turned my whole world upside down, Lucina commented, staring at the ground in front of them, her throat clenching up. Maybe your world was already upside down then, and you recently set it straight. The wise old man took a long haul of his pipe again and turned to offer it to Lucina, who shook her head. Smoking was not something Lucina was attracted to. It was actually something she found disgusting. I am offering you a peace pipe. It is an insult to refuse it. Oh, in that case, thank you. Uncertain how to proceed, she put her lips to the wet mouthpiece and took a long puff. Instantly she coughed and couldn't continue. Real tobacco, not for weaklings, he answered, laughing. When a Native American offers you a pipe, never refuse it. It is a sign of friendship and complicity. Tobacco clears the mind and calms the spirit. It was the first time Lucina had looked at tobacco in that light. She coughed some more. You know, the funniest thing about life is that you always think you have everything under control until you don't anymore. Your dream speaks about this fear of letting go, of living from a place of feeling rather than thinking. In your dream, you know things and you don't need to rationalize. I think it's time you just surrender to your spirit and let your journey unfold without judging yourself or regretting past choices. Just enjoy the ride. That was a good suggestion. Lucina felt its truth inside her, like the time she had heard, "You are forgiven," or felt the breeze kiss her skin in agreement. She was indeed living life in a whole new way lately. Weeping Willow stood up. Well, I should return to the group. It was nice talking with you, Miss Canada. Dreams are our best friends of the night. They should not be feared but welcomed. Learn from them, don't run from them. Fall into the abyss over and over again until you no longer fear it. Burn over and over again until you feel you are 100% true to yourself and nothing else. Follow the path of least resistance and stop trying to remember everything. It lives inside of you. Standing up as well, Lucina offered her hand and Weeping Willow shook it firmly. Thank you for your wise words. I won't forget them. Especially don't forget who you are, was the reply. Lucina watched the tall Indian walk away and felt happy inside. Her dream was her friend, not her enemy. She was on the right path. Her mistakes were just part of her soul plan, and she didn't need to understand everything anymore. The path of truth is loaded with hurdles and tests, she whispered to herself, moving towards the group. Later on, after having said goodnight to everyone, Lucina drove back to her apartment. She tiredly walked up the steps and unlocked the door. Looking down at her feet, she noticed a small white envelope. Matthias again, she thought as she picked it up. She opened her door and then threw her purse on the couch. Matthias with the big heart, she muttered, tearing open the envelope. She stopped breathing. Her hands shook. Inside the small envelope was a large green leaf. On the back of the leaf in permanent marker were written these words: I was in town and needed to see that you were alive and well. I watched you around the fire tonight. You looked beautiful. I need more time to heal. Teleo. Lucina put her hands on her forehead and shakily sat down on the couch. Teleo was here. Teleo was alive. Teleo was there tonight around the campfire somewhere in the dark watching. She felt a huge weight lift from her shoulders and she couldn't help but cry. There was hope. There was hope that he would forgive her and return. Putting the leaf over her heart, she found herself giving thanks for this wonderful news. Even though he wasn't physically back, at least his heart was still reaching out, and in a way, this short message written on the back of a leaf showed that he still loved her. Thank you. Thank you for listening, and thank you for the water. So that is the excerpt I wanted to read tonight because, like I said, I feel like we have been through a bit of a crazy period winter-wise. And does anyone have any questions about anything? I know that I'm new, so anything that someone would like to comment on or discuss? The darkness.
It's interesting that I had never heard of you, and so something just kept telling me to come tonight.
Right.
I feel like you're describing exactly what I'm going through right now. So.
Wow. Okay. Like a sort of mirror effect is happening. You know, a lot of women have read this book and have told me that I wrote about them, and I'm really glad to hear people say that. But I've really written about myself in a way that isn't pretentious or I was not focused on the ego. I wasn't focused on choosing my words as much as I was concerned about being real with people, because there are a lot of authors out there and they write a lot of beautiful things, but it's so strange when you actually meet them. They're so different than what they teach in their books. So I've always promised myself I would be always real. And sometimes people read my books and they're sometimes a little disturbed by the honesty of it. But I've promised myself I will never diverge from being an honest writer. And so the language is simple. It's almost like reading a diary sometimes. But women do relate to it. So if you've had dark periods and felt alone and felt discouraged, these books are really, they're crafted to help you get that joy back and especially accept who you are and get strong again. So that's what these books do. And I know we have the books upstairs, I believe. So I think we'll be moving upstairs now. Thank you so much. Thank you.